the truthfulness and the candor and the directness of his speeches was appealing for a period of time.
For decades, Judge Judy Sheindlin has been known as one of the toughest, most unshakable figures on television. Sharp words, zero tolerance, absolute control. To millions, she seemed like a woman who had everything figured out, especially her personal life. When it came to her divorce, the story always felt simple, quiet, closed, something from the past that didn't need revisiting. Until now. At 83, Judge Judy has finally allowed the public to look behind the robe, and what she revealed has stunned even her most loyal fans. Because the real reason behind her divorce was never about fame, money, or public pressure. It was about something far more personal and far more painful. For years, Judy chose silence, not because she had nothing to say, but because saying it would mean reopening wounds. She worked hard to survive. While her career soared and her courtroom persona became legendary, her private life was unraveling in ways no one ever suspected. The woman who commanded respect from everyone else was quietly navigating a heartbreak she never spoke about. Those closest to her noticed changes, subtle ones, a sharper edge, longer hours, a deeper emotional distance. But no one imagined that behind her success was a marriage slowly breaking under the weight of unspoken truths. What makes this revelation so powerful isn't just why the marriage ended, but why she waited so long to explain it. At an age when most people reflect quietly, Judge Judy chose honesty instead, and in doing so, she revealed a side of herself the public had never been allowed to see. This is not a story about divorce. It's a story about sacrifice, about choosing strength over comfort, and about the emotional cost of becoming a legend. Because sometimes, the strongest people stay silent the longest, and when they finally speak, the truth changes everything. For most of her life, Judge Judy Sheindlin was seen as unbreakable. Long before she became a television icon, she built her reputation on clarity, discipline, and an unshakable sense of right and wrong. In court, she demanded honesty. In life, she projected certainty. That's why, to the outside world, her marriage seemed solid, almost unquestionable. But what people saw was not what Judy lived. When Judy married, she believed in partnership, not perfection, but balance. She believed that two strong individuals could grow side by side without losing themselves. In the early years, that belief felt justified. There was laughter, shared ambition, a sense that they were building something together. Yet even then, cracks existed, quiet ones. They didn't appear as arguments or dramatic moments. They showed up in smaller ways: missed conversations, emotional distance disguised as independence, sacrifices made without acknowledgement. Judy was rising fast in a profession that demanded intensity and time. Her work wasn't just a job, it was a calling. And not everyone was prepared for the space that calling required. At first, she adjusted. She softened edges at home. She carried responsibility silently. She learned when to stay quiet, when to push forward alone. Like many driven women of her time, Judy believed compromise was part of love. And for a while, it worked, at least on the surface. But the cost was personal. The more she grew professionally, the more invisible she felt privately. Her success didn't create unity. It created imbalance. Expectations shifted. Support thinned. The marriage didn't collapse, it slowly hollowed out. What made it harder was Judy's refusal to play the victim. She didn't complain. She didn't confide. She kept moving forward, convincing herself that strength meant endurance. After all, she was building a career that demanded respect in a world that didn't easily give it to women, silly, outspoken ones. And yet, in the quiet moments, doubt crept in. Was she asking too much? Was her ambition a burden? Was love supposed to feel this lonely? Those questions stayed unanswered for years. From the outside, everything looked fine. No scandals, no public tension. Just a marriage quietly continuing alongside a career that was beginning to explode. But inside, Judy felt something slipping. She was becoming someone the world admired while slowly losing the version of herself that felt understood at home. The woman who spoke so confidently for others found herself choosing silence in her own life. The irony wasn't lost on her. She judged cases rooted in honesty while living inside unspoken truths. She demanded accountability in court while making excuses in her marriage. And each compromise, each swallowed feeling, added another layer of distance. By the time she realized how far apart they had grown, the gap felt too wide to cross. Still, she stayed. Not out of fear but out of responsibility. To family, to stability, to the idea that walking away meant failure. Judy had spent her life proving she could handle anything. Admitting that something so personal wasn't working felt like a different kind of defeat. But deep down, she knew something important. This wasn't about love fading. It was about being unseen. And that truth, once recognized, would eventually change everything. By the time Judge Judy realized something was truly wrong, it wasn't because of a single argument or dramatic confrontation. It was because the silence had grown. Louder than any fight ever could, silence had become the language of her marriage. Days passed with conversations limited to logistics, schedules, obligations, responsibilities. The deeper questions, the ones that once connected them, were left untouched, not avoided intentionally, but neglected through habit. And neglect, Judy would later realize, is far more dangerous than conflict. At work, she was sharp and decisive. In court, she demanded clarity. But at home, she began shrinking parts of herself to keep the peace. She learned which topics created tension and quietly removed them from conversation. She stopped sharing certain thoughts, certain frustrations, certain dreams. Not because she didn't have them, because it felt easier not to explain. Her success continued to grow, and with it came pressure. Long hours, public recognition, a level of authority that few women of her generation were allowed to hold. While the world applauded her strength, the space at home felt increasingly fragile. Support turned conditional. Encouragement came with distance. And gradually, Judy understood that her ambition wasn't just misunderstood, it was resented. That realization cut deeper than she expected. She had never wanted to choose between love and purpose. She believed a marriage could hold both. But instead of celebration, her achievements created emotional separation. The more visible she became to the world, the less seen she felt at home. And still, she stayed quiet. Judy told herself this was normal, that marriages went through phases, that strength meant enduring discomfort without complaint. She had spent her life proving she could handle pressure. Why should this be any different? But the weight was accumulating. She began to feel like she was performing diversions of herself, the confident authority everyone admired, and the restrained woman who carefully edited her words at home. That constant switching was exhausting. It chipped away at her sense of self. The breaking point didn't arrive suddenly. It crept in. It showed up in moments when she felt relief leaving the house, in the way she hesitated before sharing good news, in the quiet resentment she refused to name. These weren't signs of anger, they were signs of emotional withdrawal. One evening, after a long day, Judy realized something unsettling. She no longer felt like explaining herself. Not because she didn't care, but because she no longer believed it would matter. That realization scared her. Marriage, she understood, doesn't end when people stop loving each other. It ends when they stop trying to be understood. And she had reached that edge quietly, without drama, without witnesses. There was no betrayal, no explosive fight, just two people growing in different directions, one expanding into her purpose, the other pulling away from it. Judy began asking herself questions she had avoided for years. Why am I always the one adjusting? Why does my success feel like a problem here? Why do I feel lonelier married than alone? The answers were painful but clear. She wasn't asking for too much. She was asking the wrong place. Still, deciding to leave wasn't simple. Divorce carried weight, especially for someone who valued responsibility and commitment. Judy worried about the example it would set, about judgment, about failure. But she also knew this truth. Staying silent was slowly erasing her, and that was a cost she could no longer justify. The marriage hadn't shattered. It had faded. And in that quiet fading, Judy realized the hardest truth of all sometimes. Strength isn't staying. It's knowing when silence has already done enough damage. Judge Judy had ruled on thousands of cases, but none prepared her for the judgment she now had to make about her own life. There was no gavel, no clear right or wrong, Just a quiet moment of reckoning that had been building for years. The realization came not during a fight, but in stillness. One morning, Judy looked ahead not just to the next month or year, but to the rest of her life. She imagined continuing exactly as things were. The same silences, the same emotional restraint, the same feeling of being admired everywhere except where it mattered most. And she felt something unexpected. Fear, not of being alone but of disappearing. She understood then that staying wasn't neutral. It was a choice, and it was a choice that asked her to keep shrinking, keep explaining less, keep dimming the parts of herself that refused to fit comfortably inside the marriage. That was the moment she knew. The decision didn't bring relief right away. It brought grief. Judy mourned the version of her life she had once believed in the marriage she hoped would grow with her, not away from her. She mourned the years spent waiting for things to feel different, but grief also brought clarity. She wasn't leaving out of anger. She wasn't walking away because love had vanished. She was choosing honesty over endurance, and that distinction mattered deeply to her. When the conversation finally happened, it was calm. There were no raised voices, no accusations, just truth, spoken carefully but firmly. Judy explained what she had carried silently for years: the loneliness, the imbalance, the exhaustion of feeling unseen. She didn't demand understanding. She simply stated what was no longer possible for her. The response confirmed what she already knew. They were standing in different emotional places. There was sadness, yes, but also a quiet acknowledgement that something essential had been lost long before that conversation. What remained was history, not connection. Walking away wasn't dramatic. It was heavy. Judy felt the weight of judgment she knew would come. From society, from colleagues, from people who believed strength meant staying no matter the cost. She understood those beliefs. She had lived by them for most of her life. But she also understood something else now. A strong woman doesn't owe her silence to anyone. The days that followed were difficult. There were logistical decisions, emotional aftershocks, moments of doubt. Judy questioned herself more than once. Was she being selfish? Was she giving up too easily? Each time, she returned to the same truth. She had tried, quietly, consistently, for years. Choosing herself didn't feel empowering at first. It felt terrifying. But beneath that fear was something steadier: self-respect. For the first time in a long while, Judy didn't feel like she was betraying herself to keep the peace. She felt aligned. Even in uncertainty, she felt honest. The divorce didn't define her, but it freed her. It allowed her to stop apologizing for who she was becoming. It allowed her to build a life where her ambition wasn't a problem to manage, but a truth to be honored. Looking back now, at 83, Judy doesn't speak about that decision with bitterness. She speaks about it with understanding. She recognizes the courage it took not just to leave, but to admit that staying had stopped being an act of love. Some choices change your path, others save your identity. That decision did both. For years, Judge Judy allowed the world to believe a simple version of her divorce: that it was mutual, that it was private, that it was just one of those things that happens when two people grow apart. She didn't correct the narrative not because it was accurate, but because it was easier. At 83, she finally chose honesty. The real reason behind her divorce was never about fame, money, or public pressure. It wasn't about another person or a dramatic betrayal. It was about something far quieter and far more devastating. Judge Judy divorced because she had become emotionally alone inside her marriage for a long time. She didn't recognize it as loneliness. She called it independence, strength, self-reliance, traits she had always valued. But with time and distance, she understood the difference between being strong and being unsupported. She realized she was carrying everything: her ambition, her stress, her growth by herself. The marriage hadn't failed because of conflict. It failed because there was no longer space for her to fully exist. Her success, her voice, her intensity, these weren't embraced. They were tolerated. And tolerance, she would later say, is not love. At 83, Judy admitted something she had never said out loud before. She spent years feeling like she had to make herself smaller to keep the relationship intact. That truth haunted her more than the divorce ever did. She explained that she didn't leave because she stopped loving. She left because she stopped being able to recognize herself in the role she was playing. The cost of staying wasn't unhappiness, it was self-erasure, and she refused to disappear. What took her so long to say this publicly wasn't fear of judgment, it was respect. For the past, for family, for the belief that not every truth needs to be shared immediately. Judy waited until time softened the edges, until honesty could exist without anger. Now, she speaks with clarity, not regret. She doesn't blame. She doesn't accuse. She acknowledges that both people did what they knew how to do at the time. But she also acknowledges that love without emotional partnership becomes a quiet kind of suffering. Looking back, she wishes she had understood sooner that strength doesn't mean carrying everything alone. That compromise should never require silence. That being admired by the world means little if you feel invisible at home. The divorce, she says, didn't break her. It gave her permission. Permission to stop apologizing for her drive. Permission to speak without editing herself. Permission to build a life where she didn't have to choose between love and identity. At 83, Judge Judy isn't rewriting history, she's completing it. Her revelation isn't meant to shock. It's meant to resonate. Because so many people, especially strong, capable women, stay in situations that quietly drain them. Believing endurance is the same as devotion. Judy now knows better, and she wants others to know it too. The real reason behind her divorce wasn't scandal. It was self-respect, and that truth, even decades later, was worth telling.